America stands as a relatively young nation that has risen to remarkable prominence on the world stage. Though established merely centuries ago, its influence spans economics, politics, technology, science, arts, and culture globally. What started as European coastal settlements transformed into a superpower, undergoing tremendous change while forging a unique national identity. Long before European arrival, indigenous peoples inhabited these lands for millennia. Their ancestors crossed from Eurasia approximately 16,000 years ago via the Bering Land Bridge, developing sophisticated societies. However, the American nation's political, economic, social, and cultural foundations derive predominantly from European origins. Americans generally trace their national story to Christopher Columbus's voyages, though Vikings and possibly others reached these shores earlier. Columbus's journey initiated the processes linking the Old and New worlds, making him historically significant despite not being first. Columbus sailed westward seeking alternative trade routes to India after Ottoman Turks blocked traditional eastern passages by capturing Constantinople. Landing in the Caribbean, he claimed territories for Spain, never realizing he had discovered a new continent. Rather than Asia, this misunderstanding explains why indigenous peoples were called Indians. Columbus became governor, but his brutal treatment of natives horrified Spanish monarchs, leading to his removal. He died in 1504, yet his legacy of connecting two worlds endured. European powers became intensely interested in New World opportunities. Spain and Portugal led exploration for over a century, extending control across the Americas. England has King Henry, the 7th commissioned Italian explorer Giovanni Caboto, John Cabot, who landed in 1497 at what was likely Newfoundland or Nova Scotia. Though Cabot's subsequent fate remains unclear, he established English interest in North America. Multiple nations attempted colonies over the next century, most failing due to disease, starvation, harsh conditions, and conflicts with indigenous inhabitants. England's first attempt at Roanoke Island in modern North Carolina began in 1584 under Queen Elizabeth I's charter to Sir Walter Raleigh. This settlement produced the first English child born in America, Virginia Dare, in 1587. However, when leader John White returned from England after delays, he found the colony mysteriously abandoned with only Croatoan carved on a tree. This first English colonization effort ended as both failure and enduring mystery. England tried again 17 years later, founding Jamestown in Virginia on May 14, 1607. Settlers expected to extract precious metals but found little. They faced immediate attacks from Powhatan tribes, though they constructed strong fortifications quickly. The colony arrived during a severe drought and missed planting season. Many colonists lacked farming skills and disease proved devastating. Within 5 years, population plummeted from 500 to 60. Leader John Smith held the colony together, demanding supplies from England and instituting the biblical rule, "He who will not work will not eat." He negotiated successfully with natives and named the New England region. After Smith's injury in 1609 forced his return to England, colonists endured the starving time, resorting to eating animals, snakes, and even cannibalism. Native attacks continued and paranoia reigned. Lord Delaware's arrival and John Rolfe's introduction of a profitable tobacco strain saved Jamestown. Rolfe's marriage to Chief Powhatan's daughter Pocahontas secured temporary peace. The colony grew to thousands, many arriving as indentured servants who worked contractually for passage and residence. In 1619, the first African slaves arrived that same year. The House of Burgesses assembled as the first elected representative body, though initially only Englishmen voted. Polish, Slovak, and German settlers protested exclusion and won voting rights within a month after refusing to work. Meanwhile, religious separatists called Pilgrims left England seeking freedom from the Anglican Church. After a stay in the Netherlands, they sailed on the Mayflower in 1620, settling in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Before landing, they created the Mayflower Compact, establishing governance principles. Half died the first winter, but relationships with Wampanoag natives developed positively. The natives taught English settlers farming techniques, and together they celebrated the harvest feast that became Thanksgiving. The 1630s saw England's 13 colonies taking shape despite competition from Spain, the Dutch, Sweden, and France, plus resistance from Native Americans. The Pequot War erupted in 1636 over English expansion and trade disputes, culminating in the Mystic Massacre, where English forces and native allies killed over 500 Pequot villagers. By the 1640s, tens of thousands of English settlers inhabited the colonies. During the Anglo-Dutch Wars of the 1650s, England conquered Dutch territories including New Amsterdam, renamed New York. Charleston was founded in 1670, establishing the Carolina colonies named for Charles II. Labor demands increased indentured servitude and African slavery. King Philip's War, 1675 to 1678, resulted from English expansion pressures. Thousands died and significant New England areas were devastated before English victory secured coastal control. Bacon's rebellion in 1678 arose when Virginia Governor Berkeley prevented westward expansion into native lands. Nathaniel Bacon led raids on indigenous villages and rebels burned much of Jamestown. After Bacon's death from dysentery, the rebellion collapsed. Colonial authorities responded by phasing out indentured servitude, increasing reliance on African slave labor in the agricultural South. France claimed Louisiana Territory in 1680, setting up tensions with expanding English colonies. Both powers sought control of North American waterways, including the Great Lakes and Ohio River. 4 major wars resulted, coinciding with European conflicts: King William's War, 1688, Queen Anne's War 1702-1713, and King George's War, 1740, saw territorial adjustments with Britain generally gaining ground. The French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763, finally settled Anglo-French disputes. British colonies had grown to 2 million while only 60,000. French Canadians inhabited territories from Louisiana to Canada, however. France maintained strong military presence and better native relations. Most tribes sided with France, except groups like the Iroquois. War erupted over Great Lakes and Ohio River disputes when young Virginian officer George Washington engaged French forces. Colonies united at the Albany Congress, where Benjamin Franklin proposed common defense. The French dominated early years, but tide turned in 1758. Britain captured strategic positions, and General James Wolfe's 1760 victory at the Plains of Abraham secured Quebec, effectively ending major fighting, though war officially continued until 1763. The Treaty of Paris gave Britain Canada, Ohio Territories, and Florida, while France retained Caribbean colonies and ceded Louisiana to Spain. Britain emerged as North America's unchallenged power but faced doubled national debt, leading to increased colonial taxation and future complications. Pontiac's rebellion followed as natives resisted British expansion. The Royal Proclamation of 1763 forbade settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains, agitating colonists who felt restricted and sometimes faced forced removal. Tensions escalated throughout the 1760s as Britain imposed taxes including the Sugar, Currency, and Stamp Acts to cover war debts. The Quartering Act required colonists to house soldiers who could enter homes for inspections. 9 colonies sent representatives to protest through the Declaration of Rights and Grievances. Colonists objected not to taxation amounts, but to taxation without representation in Parliament. Though Britain repealed the Stamp Act, the Declaratory and Townshend Acts followed, asserting parliamentary authority and imposing indirect taxes on paper, tea, and glass. Protests intensified in the 1770s. The Boston Massacre involved British soldiers firing into a violent crowd. In 1773, the Boston Tea Party saw Sons of Liberty, disguised as natives, dumping tea shipments overboard. Britain cracked down harder, leading to the First Continental Congress in 1774 with attendees including Patrick Henry and Samuel and John Adams. Initially seeking reconciliation rather than independence, they tried reasoning with Britain. The Second Continental Congress included Thomas Jefferson and George Washington. Spring 1775 brought the battles of Lexington and Concord when British troops attempted seizing weapons, firing the shot heard round the world. Congress adopted the Continental Army under Washington's command on June 15. The Olive Branch Petition sought peace, but King George III's proclamation of rebellion dashed hopes. War continued until July 4, 1776, when Congress declared independence. Britain sent massive forces, including Hessian mercenaries, capturing New York and forcing Washington's retreat. His surprise, Christmas Day, 1776 attack at Trenton boosted morale. The following year's Saratoga campaign repelled British northern advances, though winter at Valley Forge proved harsh. Prussian officer Baron von Steuben trained American troops in professional military tactics. France openly allied with America after Saratoga, joined by Spain and the Netherlands, providing crucial funding, supplies, troops, and naval power. Without this foreign aid, especially French support, American victory would have been unlikely. The 1781 siege of Yorktown saw combined American and French forces defeat the British in the war as last major battle. Though fighting officially continued until the 1783 Treaty of Paris recognized American sovereignty and granted territory east of the Mississippi. The new nation faced building government under the Articles of Confederation, which left the central government weak without powers to levy taxes, organize trade, enforce laws, or raise armies. States retained most governing power. Many founders believed only a stronger central government could hold the nation together, especially after Shays' Rebellion. Delegates convened in Philadelphia in 1787, writing a new constitution organizing government into three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial, each checking the others to ensure democracy. George Washington became first president unanimously with John Adams as vice president. In 1791, the first 10 amendments formed the Bill of Rights, protecting freedoms including speech, religion, assembly, and bearing arms while limiting government power. This constitution didn't grant rights but restricted governmental authority, with people granting government limited rule. Only about 6% of the population could initially vote. White landowning males. Rights for women and free blacks, occasionally permitted before, were gradually revoked. The 1790s saw a population around 4 million, just over 1% of today's figure. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 established territorial expansion procedures, laying foundations for future states including Ohio, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Political parties emerged, with Federalists led by Alexander Hamilton favoring strong central government and banking, while Democratic Republicans under Thomas Jefferson preferred more democratic, domestically focused governance. The French Revolution split parties, with Federalists supporting Britain and Democratic Republicans sympathizing with French revolutionaries. President Washington opposed both party divisions and foreign alliances, maintaining neutrality despite French alliance requests. The 1795 Jay Treaty established Britain as America's closest trading partner, though remaining unpopular due to continued British provocations, including arming hostile natives and impressment of American sailors. John Adams succeeded Washington in 1797, pursuing neutrality but entering the quasi-war with France, an unofficial naval conflict. Adams' Alien and Sedition Acts restricted immigration and allowed imprisonment of critics, quickly repealed, but showing free speech wasn't yet firmly established. Peace came when Napoleon negotiated with American diplomats. Thomas Jefferson's 1801 election brought changes. The farmer from Virginia disliked federal government and banks, sympathizing with agricultural majority. Ohio became the 17th state in 1803. More significantly, Napoleon sold Louisiana Territory for remarkably cheap, about $300 million in current value after losing. Haiti Jefferson sent the Lewis and Clark expedition westward to explore, establish native relations, and search fruitlessly for the Northwest Passage, revealing how little Americans knew of Western territories. James Madison's 1809 presidency faced continuing British problems, including sailor impressment, ship harassment, and arming natives, including Tecumseh's Shawnee Confederation. America declared war in 1812. Britain, occupied with Napoleonic wars, initially couldn't respond strongly, but held off. Canadian expansion and blockaded American trade while recruiting escaped slaves. American military proved inefficient, relying on militias rather than standing armies considered dangerous. After Napoleon's 1814 defeat, Britain focused on America, overwhelming forces and capturing Washington, D.C., burning the White House. During Baltimore's defense, Francis Scott Key wrote The Star-Spangled Banner. December 1814 peace negotiations at Ghent, Belgium produced a treaty, though fighting continued afterward, including Andrew Jackson's New Orleans victory before news arrived. The war ended essentially in a draw. Post-war national pride surged. Road, canal, and railroad construction facilitated trade and expansion. Steamboats revolutionized transportation. Factories appeared, especially in the North, while the South focused on agriculture, though both regions prospered. The market revolution, driven by industrial advances, employed women and hundreds of thousands of immigrants, reshaping American work life and positioning America for greater power. Hundreds of thousands of settlers moved westward over decades, fostering the concept of manifest destiny that God granted America rights to continental expansion. The 1823 Monroe Doctrine declared the United States would prevent European colonization throughout the hemisphere. Though militarily insufficient to enforce this alone, British support made it viable, marking America's emergence from isolation and early imperialism powered by Industrial Revolution. Andrew Jackson's 1828 election represented common people. The military veteran from humble origins opposed national banks favoring upper classes and extended voting rights to landless whites. As Southerner experienced in native conflicts, he signed the Indian Removal Act relocating Cherokee, Choctaw, Muskogee, Chickasaw, and Seminole peoples to Oklahoma. Despite protests calling it inhumane and contradicting integration efforts dating to founding fathers, the government proceeded with the Trail of Tears, where roughly 10,000 people, 1/4 perished during forced relocation. Florida's Seminole tribe resisted, leading to extended wars. The 1830s brought the Second Great Awakening religious movement, abolitionist calls, and northern public schools, though Southerners distrusted government education. Native American conflicts continued. In 1835, American settlers in Texas rebelled against Mexico, declaring independence. A decade later, America admitted Texas, then targeted California. The resulting Mexican-American War ended within 2 years when American forces captured Mexico City, incorporating southwestern territories. The California Gold Rush followed. American territory now stretched Atlantic to Pacific between Mexican and Canadian borders, fulfilling manifest destiny goals. However, fierce debate arose over whether new territories would permit slavery. Originally, a dividing line determined slave versus free states, with balance maintained as states joined. Allowing territories to decide for themselves led to violent conflicts, particularly in Kansas during the 1850s. As slavery tensions grew, books like Uncle Tom's Cabin exposed slavery's realities, while John Brown's failed rebellion sparked fears of uprisings. Haiti's 1804 slave rebellion, which killed and expelled all whites, solidified Southern opposition to abolition, while Northerners increasingly believed a nation holding slaves couldn't be truly free. Abraham Lincoln's 1860 election with 40% of votes triggered the Civil War, final fight over slavery. Lincoln promised not to touch existing slavery but opposed expansion into new territories. Before inauguration, South Carolina, Florida, Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, Louisiana, and Texas seceded, forming the Confederate States of America. When the South demanded federal property, the North refused. On April 12, 1861, Confederate forces attacked Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Virginia, Arkansas, North Carolina, and Tennessee joined the Confederacy. Both sides expected quick victory. The North had more industry, population, railroads, and war preparation. The South merely needed defensive endurance, expecting agricultural wealth would attract British and French support that never materialized. The First Battle of Bull Run Confederate victory showed war would last longer than anticipated. Union strategy evolved from failed attempts capturing Richmond to blockading ports and controlling the Mississippi. War divided into Western and Eastern fronts. Former U.S. General Robert E. Lee joined Confederates in 1862, achieving Eastern successes that made Confederate victory increasingly realistic. However, 1863 brought change. Lee's aggressive strategies backfired at Gettysburg in July, a Union victory often considered the war's turning point. The next day, Ulysses S. Grant captured Vicksburg. Controlling the Mississippi and splitting the Confederacy, Grant became general of all Union forces. Confederate invasion hopes ended, forcing defensive fighting. Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation freeing slaves in rebel territories. Union strategy focused on exhausting Confederate supplies, exemplified by Sherman's march to the sea, destroying 1/5 of Georgia's farms. Confederates held out until Robert E. Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9, 1865. The Civil War, featuring railroads, telegraphs, and ironclad warships, represented one of the first industrial wars, foreshadowing future destructiveness. The South emerged impoverished from prolonged unsustainable conflict. The Civil War remains America's deadliest war with approximately 700,000 deaths. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments abolished slavery, established African American citizenship, and extended voting rights to blacks, though heavily contested especially in the South. Federal power over states strengthened, creating greater national unity. People shifted from referring to the United States are to the United States is, identifying more with the nation than individual states' president. Lincoln didn't witness these changes, assassinated at Ford's Theater on April 14, 1865. Though called the Great Emancipator, Lincoln and many Northerners believed slavery wrong without considering blacks equals. Many Americans preferred returning former slaves to origins rather than integrating them, specifically to Liberia, America's only African colony established in the 1820s for freed slaves, now independent. However, most remained in the United States as the nation continued its complex journey forward.